we become even more aware of what it is that we're trying to develop when we're talking about social and emotional development.
Something that made you realize, wow, it's like completely different to be a 15-year-old right now.
Yeah, I was at a gathering. A mom friend of mine told me that their son had their first AI relationship and their first AI breakup.
And to the parents listening, this isn't about surviving AI, giving your kids the wisdom and confidence to live with it.
I really come from the perspective that says, technology doesn't exist on its own. It's always embedded in our social structures, and that includes a family.
AI could worsen divides, trapping children in survival mode. So how can AI guide and foster well-being instead?
Really what that looks like is enabling and empowering all students to have visibility into how AI works so that they can become the masters of it. Like on the one hand, I would tell you, focus on your own work because it's the only work that you're going to ever get credit for is your own learning, and your education is the only thing that no one can take away from you.
If you're a parent who feels like you're just trying to survive the wave of AI, or you're lying awake wondering if these tools are even helping your kids, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AI Parenting Institute. I'm your host, Rayan Ali, and our mission on this podcast is to bridge the gap between today's leading AI experts and the parents and teens who are shaping the world of tomorrow. Our entire podcast is about moving families over from surviving to thriving in the AI world. And today, we have the guide we've all been waiting for. Anya Kamenetz is one of the most trusted voices in America for childhood education and technology. And today, she's here to help us find the calm, practical path forward. Anya, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Anya, you've been a calm, rational voice for a lot of parents out in a lot of tech panics. So, what first drew you into this kind of work field, and what keeps pursuing you to keep guiding these families through the anxiety?
Yeah, so I got my start writing about education from the students' point of view, students and recent graduates, and I was really laser focused on what young people were and weren't getting out of their education. And that led me to be really interested as a younger person myself in the innovations in education. If knowledge is available at our fingertips, why do we have to go through school and sit through school and go through all these barriers and gatekeepers? And is there a better way? And as I got older and became a parent myself, I was really struck by the contrast between the very sort of hype-based conversation around technology and education and the very fear-based conversation that parents were hearing, which is essentially that screen time is going to rot your child's brain. And I had my own questions about, the role of technology in the developing mind. But I felt like the truth had to be somewhere in the middle. And I really come from the perspective that says, technology doesn't exist on its own. It's always embedded in our social structures, and that includes a family. And technology is supposed to be a tool. It's supposed to be useful. So we need to kind of clear away the fear and the concerns and the hype and figure out a way to make it work for us.
Mm-hmm. So another question from your perspective, as a journalist, have you heard a specific story from like a teen, a parent, or a teacher about AI that really stuck with you? Like something that made you realize, wow, it's like completely different to be a 15-year-old right now.
Yeah, I was at a gathering and a mom friend of mine told me that their son had their first AI relationship and their first AI breakup. So they were, with one of these like romantic bots chatting and had constructed this whole kind of ideal partner for themselves. Mind you, this is a ninth grader, right? And they kind of went through this process of, shaping their ideal partner, having conversations, texting, and then some kind of glitch happened with the app and the person was erased. And they built them back up, but it wasn't the same. So there wasn't the same bond. They didn't have the same kind of relationship. And it was at that point that they actually wrote a short story about the experience, which my friend read. And that's the first she heard of it. She didn't know anything of this that was going on until after it already had happened. And so I was astonished to hear this. I mean, the fact that, my friend who's very involved mom was so in the dark about the way that her son was using technology. The fact that her son had this intense emotional experience really was all like a first relationship, first breakup, and all through AI.
Mhm. For our readers, do you by chance know like the name of the short story?
So this is a short story that the ninth grader had written about his own
Oh,
experiences.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Moving on to our next question. When you talk about generational justice, what does that look like? And how do we ensure AI creates opportunities for all kids to flourish and not just a new framework for survival?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I talk about generational justice, I really think about how age in our society can be correlated with power in a lot of different ways. And of course, people know about ageism, which is prejudice against older people. But I feel like there's not enough conversation about younger people and the ways that they're overlooked, disenfranchised, and really like a first line community. So, young people are existing in the society without voting rights, without participation rights, without economic rights. They're basically pushed around and told what to do. And it's supposed to be a benevolent dictatorship. You're growing up in your family and your family loves you and the school wants what's best for you. And so does the government. But in fact, we don't have a democratic experience. So when it comes to especially like issues like climate change, which I think about a lot, young people are more exposed to the risks of climate change than older people because they're going to live longer into the future. And so I'm really, really passionate about making sure that young people have a voice and have as much agency as possible, and that we're able to center them in our decision making. And when that comes to things like technology and AI, it means not making decisions for them. I don't really believe in labeling young people or in making blanket, prohibitions against them using kinds of technology. I think that technology should be designed to be safer for kids to use. And I make an analogy to city streets, right? In one way, you say like, well, I'm going to create a city that has public transportation, safe streets, walkable neighborhoods, and that's going to give my kids a lot of freedom. They can ride their bike, right? This is, by the way, luckily I live in Brooklyn. My kids have this ability. They can get around by themselves. The other way to go is I'm going to have cars everywhere, fast speeds, and my kids are basically going to be locked up in the house unless they can find someone to drive them. And that's my analogy to onerous regulations with technology that basically say, either you're on or you're off at the age of 18, and making decisions on design of technology that don't have young people at the center.
Mhm. Um, Thank you for the answer. Given the existing stress and inequality, AI could worsen divides, trapping children in survival mode. So, how can AI guide and foster well-being instead?
Well, it's a really tough question because you can look at the inequality with AI in a bunch of different ways. There's plenty of schools, and especially around the world as well as around the country, where there's much less access to technology, and there's less access that's supervised and that's guided with skillful teachers that can help students understand the best way to do it. And then, of course, we also see that there's a reverse digital divide, so that young people who have lower incomes are less likely to be supervised by adults in organized activities, and they're spending more time on their phones, on their screens.
Mhm.
And that time is increasingly being filled up with slop feeds, right? Chatbots, slop, and things that aren't necessarily the most beneficial. And so that's a reverse divide because those kids are not being empowered to use technology. They're basically being force fed technology. Um, so I love that you asked the question to turn it around to a question of justice, because really what that looks like is enabling and empowering all students to have visibility into how AI works so that they can become the masters of it. And I will say that, it's a little bit, this jury's still out, but there is a big partnership going on between the American Federation of Teachers, which is being funded by several companies to train teachers in the use of AI. And I'm on mixed feelings about this, but I understand why the AFT decided to get into it, because these are public school teachers from around the country, and they know that their kids are using AI and they want to be able to teach them the best way to do it.
Mhm. So that also brings me to our next question of like adding a screen time of some sort to like the kids who watch too much, you know?
Yeah.
And so your art of screen time philosophy was about finding a healthy balance.
Yeah.
Now, with generative AI, that's infinitely engaging. So how can families use that to spend more time together rather than just fighting for their kids' attention?
I think that the message in the art of screen time is, enjoy screens not too much and mostly together. And
Mm,
I really do advocate for a healthy balance of on and off screen times. I think that every family should have, screen-free meals, time outside, screens out of the bedroom at night, and just to have that little like relief time. And I think another thing that's a positive trend, frankly, is 30 states now have some sort of statewide restriction on phone use during school.
Mhm.
And so that's really just giving people a chance to be away from the screens and to hopefully focus on face to face and focus on, distraction free learning. So I think that's a positive trend, but it doesn't necessarily fill the need for parents to be the coaches and the mentors to help students how to understand how to engage young people, how to engage positively with technology. In order to do that, you do need to bring technology and AI into some of your family time. Notice I say some of it, right? And, I think it's going to look very different for different families. But the positive way of doing it is really to think about how you use AI, right? Most people have it in some part of their workflow, some of their day to day, and that could be like researching a vacation options or looking for recipes based on what you have in the fridge, or even getting into a dialogue where you don't want your kids to go directly to AI with a personal problem because you don't want them to have that unmediated quasi friendship relationship with the AI. But let's say that you're talking with your kid about, for example, last night, my 13-year-old's turning 14, wants to throw a birthday party. And he said to me, I have these different friend groups and I'm not sure if they're going to get along at the party. And so we had a conversation about it. We kicked around some ideas, but we could have gone to AI and said, what are your thoughts about this? Like, should we come up with an activity we can all do together? Or are there ways to break the ice or to structure the party so that these different friend groups can mix? So that way AI is kind of like a brainstorming partner.
Exactly. Now I want to switch over to some yes or no questions.
Yeah.
And I want to test your balanced philosophy against some real life choices parents face daily with AI. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios and I want you to just give me a yes or no answer. Ready?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Scenario 1. Your 14-year-old uses AI to help write an essay. The work looks way too polished. You're torn and proud they use the AI wisely, but you're unsure what's actually theirs. So, do you let them submit the work as is without asking for proof of what's theirs?
Um, No, I wouldn't do that. I would make sure that this is in line with the guidelines that this teacher's given out. And frankly, I have a real life ninth grader. I'm not in the loop on when they're submitting assignments. I talk to them when they're working on the assignment, so I have a very good visibility into their writing process. And in their school, AI is not allowed, so it's pretty clear cut. If they're using AI and it seems too polished, I think that would be a flag for a teacher as well. So I would definitely ask them to kind of try it again.
Okay. Scenario 2. At dinner, your family barely talks, and an AI assistant suggests some personalized bonding topics based on recent searches and messages your family makes. Do you let it lead the conversation?
No, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I can understand some families would do that and people have different comfort levels, but I think for our family, we really pride ourselves on having conversations that are based on listening to each other.
Scenario 3. Your 16-year-old tells you they want to become an AI influencer instead of going to college. They're genuinely talented, but you know how volatile the tech world is. Do you let them pursue the idea without having a backup plan?
Um, it's funny. This actually happened to a friend of mine recently. He came home. Yeah, well, not specifically an AI influencer, but an exercise influencer is what he wants to do. So he's postponing college. And at that point, he's 18 years old. So he doesn't have that. They don't have the ability to really stop him. They're trying to support him. If I had a 16-year-old, I would say, apply to college, maybe defer admission for a year. So you do have a backup plan. Just put that backup plan in place.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, I want to go back to the regular questions now.
Yeah.
Our test-obsessed schools often feel like they're all about survival.
Mm-hmm.
As AI breaks traditional exams, what new ways of assessing learning can we create that actually measure a student's learning and also test the human skills like curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking?
That's such a fantastic question. I wrote a book 10 years ago about the future of
Wow.
assessment. And it was about the shortcomings of standardized assessment, how it really makes for boring learning because learning that's teaching to a low quality test is always going to be kind of boring. And the truth is, now as it was then, there's an untapped promise of learning software that measures your learning as you're doing it, right? And so that if you're really capturing all of the engagement in an online program, you should have a graph of of people mastery of a concept as they're going along. And you shouldn't have to do a test at the end at all, because you should have a picture of the student's understanding. So while those types of AI assessments are being developed, the complement to that that's really, really important is that teachers and students together have a project-based curriculum where there's a truly holistic assessment, where there are, real world elements to it. There's things that are passion driven by the student. There's creative expression. And so you're talking about like a multifaceted group project, something that ideally brings the community together. And a couple of examples, there's a great program that I visited in California in a pretty low income Central Valley school district, where the students are learning different projects that have to do with climate and green energy. And one example is that they did a transportation audit for the whole school, and they looked, how does everybody get to school? They walked all the streets around the school to see how they're safe or unsafe to walk. Are there sidewalks? Is it bikeable? And they held a bike rodeo. So they like recruited younger kids to come and for a celebration of biking. And it was all to promote green transportation and walking to school. So you can see how this has a community service element. It has a science element. They were doing data production, and it's really passion driven for the kids that are in it. And that's really the best of what we can do with assessment.
That sounds great. Now, when AI can provide all the information, what skills do kids actually need to thrive? And how should schools pivot to explicitly teach human skills like wisdom, judgment, and critical thinking?
So, AI provides answers, not necessarily information. It doesn't have any sense of really what it's saying, or, and unless you push it, you're not going to get, contrasting points of view. So I really think it's a huge opportunity to ask deeper questions about, how do we know the things that we know? What is the relationship of data and measurement to, assessments and understanding? And for example, there's a researcher named Mike Caulfield who teaches data and information literacy. And he's always showing kind of like the dynamic discussion that you need to have with AI if you're doing a prompt or a query or a series of queries, where you need to always be asking it, what is the other side of this? What am I not getting? And what do other people think, right? So the skill is really understanding multiple points of view and synthesizing, and also being able to understand the quality of different forms of evidence. What is this sourced to? Is it sourced to a research paper, a blog post? If it's a research paper, is it a randomized controlled trial? If it's a randomized controlled trial, how many people were in the trial? So really being able to drill down to different levels of evidence, I think, is something that is really undertaught in schools.
Mm-hmm. You've written about intense stress in schools, which is the opposite of thriving. So do you see a path for AI to alleviate that level of anxiety for parents and teens? Or do you see AI adding a level?
I definitely see AI adding a level of stress to the extent that teachers and parents alike are really wondering where this is going to go and how it's going to disrupt their normal means of teaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then parents are worried about what it's going to do to the job market, and whether they themselves, not alone their students, are going to be able to survive in this fast-moving world. And the students are really just also, intrigued and confused, like in equal parts. So I think there is a lot of stress to go around. And in terms of AI alleviating stress, it's hard to say how, except if you're going to talk about it as a cheating machine, which I don't think that's such a short-term reliever for stress, but it's not really going to help you that long-term.
Mm-hmm. To close, Anya, I'm 15, and at my school, AI is everywhere. It feels like a huge game of cat and mouse. Some kids use it for everything, and teachers are trying to figure out who's cheating. And for the rest of us who are just trying to learn and prepare for the future that seems pretty uncertain, it's really stressful. So for someone who's in the middle of it, like you, can you give us some advice?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I sympathize with you, and it's a tough thing to be growing up and going to school at a time when things are changing so quickly. Um, you know, it, it's a difficult thing when it comes to, like, on the one hand, I would tell you focus on your own work, because it's the only work that you're going to ever get credit for is your own learning, and your education is the only thing that no one can take away from you. But I do understand if you're in a culture where it feels like other people are cheating or cutting corners to get by, that it's going to be a little bit unfair. So it's worth it to start the conversation and to go to the administration and to get other students talking about, why do we use AI? What is the purpose of this? Is it really going to help us long term? Or is it just going to be an easy shortcut? And raising that awareness, I think, is really useful and important, because everyone everywhere is having these ethical discussions, right? This is a part of your like civic learning and civic engagement, is to figure out how do we change the culture of our school so there's more engagement and learning. And it's not necessarily something you can do all by yourself, but if you follow your passion and you follow your dreams and you stay focused, it's going to be possible to get your own optimal learning no matter what else happens.
Social emotional skills are the key for thriving. So, what's the best case scenario for AI to enhance these human skills? And how do we get there without profiting off kids' emotions for data points?
Yeah, this is a really, really tough one. I do hear from people who are experts in mental health, in therapy, on the one hand, who are really intrigued by the possibility of having AI guided therapy or therapeutic AI. On the other hand, there are horror stories and there are a lot of worries about the guardrails that are or aren't put onto this machine. And we don't know the long term impact of having these intense emotional experiences with essentially a machine, right? Rather than another human being. So I think there's a lot of caution. I think the best case scenario is that we become even more aware of what it is that we're trying to develop when we're talking about social and emotional development. Like maybe 4 years ago, it was taken for granted that you're going to form emotional attachments to other people. People were worried about influencers, right? An influencer is someone that you might have an emotional attachment to or a crush on or something like that. And it's not real because it's one-sided. But now it's like you're having a crush on someone that's not even a person. And so we need to be really drilling down and asking, what is it that we want our young people to be learning and experiencing so that they can continue to develop into people that can have multifaceted relationships with human beings in the real world, it's messy. There's friction, there's misunderstandings. You have to have repair.
Mhm.
And these are all things that you don't necessarily get when you're with a chatbot that's always showing up for you, always agreeing with you, always making you feel good.
Those are what makes the friendship valuable and
Yeah.
the relationship valuable. Thank you, Anya, as this was one of the most insightful and eye-opening conversations I've ever had.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Thanks again. And to the parents listening, this isn't about surviving AI, giving your kids the wisdom and confidence to live with it. And to every teen out there, don't just use these tools to get your homework done faster. Follow Anya's advice and use them to build good judgment skills, find your authentic voice, and ask the bigger questions. Anya, where can people find more of your incredible work?
Sign up for my Substack, The Golden Hour.
Thank you, Anya. And if this episode helps you feel at ease and more capable about your family's future with AI, share it with another family because we are building a movement of responsible innovation here at the AI Parenting Institute. Once again, I'm Rayan, and thank you for trusting me with your time and your biggest parenting concerns. Until next time, let's keep building a future where kids don't adapt to change, they create it. Thank you, Anya.
Cool. Thanks, guys.